Yo, yo, what it do, what it do? So today we're talking about, what did I title this? Architecture and the economy or something. So, all right, first of all, I'm going to avoid making good or bad statements, positive or negative, because I'm a really big fan of the yin yang symbol. And I think it's a great summary of life in the universe where we have the good and the bad, and then there's a bad dot in the good, and there's a good dot in the bad. And we could look at the colors interchangeably. It really doesn't matter. But that symbol is a great metaphor for life. So I'm not going to avoid making positive and negative statements. I'm going to try to at least. So architecture, interior design, urban design, urban planning, if it's not with the city or with an authority having jurisdiction, all of these disciplines are very susceptible to swings in the economy, which I think that's a fact, right? Maybe some people live outside of the fact. Maybe some people are in architecture or urban design or interior design, and they're operating in a realm where they're not susceptible to swings in the economy. But for most of us, I think it's a fact. And I want to avoid good and bad statements because they both have amazing upsides and amazing downsides, right? Perhaps that's the reason why we have so much theory in architecture and research in architecture and crazy drawings and models of things that'll never get built, but also a lot of like people looking into data of all sorts of things and looking at systems and how they operate, like materials too. I mean, yeah, like mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Like people are integrating, trying to figure out how to integrate these systems in interesting ways. People are trying to figure out how to use new materials in design and construction. And you could argue that that is because we go through those periods where there isn't enough actual work in the field for everyone that's coming out with a degree in one of these disciplines. Right? So, I recently went back to a firm. Right? That ties into this whole thing. I was solo for a long time. But the universe took me into this direction. There were so many clear signs. And that it's a great learning process. It really is. So when I think of research in architecture, I really think about Lebbeus Woods and OMA. And there's also, are those the extremes of the spectrum? Wow. It's like Lebbeus Woods and OMA. And it's like, I don't want to, and it's like, oh, that's a bad symbol. But hey, it's like Lebbeus Woods and OMA. And it's like Peter Eisenman and Christopher Alexander. right? I didn't want to do this one at a time because I don't want to say one is bad, one is good. But see, up and down, people are just going to assume that the down is bad and the up is good, but I'm not. But I want to avoid. Man, you know what? Christopher Alexander, arguably, objectively, has a better approach to designing spaces that people will inhabit than Peter Eisenman. Christopher Alexander arguably has an objectively better approach to designing buildings and spaces that people will inhabit than Peter Eisenman. Wow, I'm making some bold statements here. Frank Lloyd Wright arguably has a better approach to the design of buildings and spaces that human beings will inhabit. Well, arguably, than Le Corbusier. I mean, some can argue the other way around, right? I'm making it very clear who I'm a fan of. I mean, I'm a fan of all these people, to be honest with you. That's crazy. Like, man, I'm a huge Le Corbusier fan. I can't say that I'm not a fan of Le Corbusier fan. But it's like, I resonate more with Frank Lloyd Wright. His visual vocabulary, his breaking down and articulation of scale in architecture, I really resonate with that. And the way Christopher Alexander describes it, so this could just be a coincidence. The way Christopher Alexander describes the ideal spaces for human inhabitation happen to resonate with me, so I happen to think he's correct. But if I were to more resonate with Eisenman and Le Corbusier, which I mean, not that I don't resonate with them, I would much more be skeptical of Christopher Alexander's writing. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. But unfortunately, paying attention to the human experience, human comfort, is not what leads directly to success financially in the field of architecture. So, I mean, what do we do? What do we do as architects? What do we do as interior designers? What do we do as urban designers? What do we do as structural engineers? What do we do as mechanical engineers? What do we do as plumbing engineers? What do we do as plumbers? What do we do as contractors? Man, the thing is, if you try to focus on the best possible product you could deliver, then you never want to end the project. You just want to keep working on it. So it's a balance. It's really a balance of quality control, being on time, being within budget. And we're all looking at this thing at two scales. We're all looking at it zoomed in, specifying the insulation, locating the smoke detectors, the carbon monoxide alarms, really deciding the movement of the person. See, that's when we zoom out. We zoom out and we look at the way people interact with the overall finished object. And that's how we look at it first. We first zoom out and we slowly start to zoom into the artifact. We should be designing from the inside out. But sometimes the outside in forces make that difficult. I think I should burn some incense. Let's burn some incense. There's a unique thing about me where I've worked for some architects that I really look up to. And it's like I haven't talked about them since I worked for them. I was like, sometimes I wonder if I should. But see, I mean, it's easier to talk about architects that I never met. It's much easier to talk about architects that I never met. I never met Lebbeus Woods. I never met Christopher Alexander. I never met Peter Eisenman. I never met Frank Lloyd Wright. I never met Le Corbusier. I never met Frank Gehry. I have met Neil Denari. I have met Tom Main. I have met Tom Wiscombe. I have met Preston Scott Cohen. I met Michael Sorkin before he passed away. What's have I met? By the way, a lot of cities have been giving a lot more MEP corrections lately, a lot more mechanical corrections, electrical corrections, plumbing corrections, which is good because a lot of sets have been approved where on the drawings the water heater is not drawn, the gas meter is not drawn, the water heater is even not drawn, the water meter is not drawn a lot of times from drawings in the past. And then construction happens and it's like these things at least should have been planned for, but like they weren't even planned for because you need certain distances between some of these protrusions that happen on the outside of the building. And sometimes when the building is designed and done and constructed, even, or even if just the foundation is poured, and it's like, you could have some issues that have not been uncovered yet. And that's where we get general contractors giving the client a legitimate change order. So the type of water heater we use, the type of HVAC system we use, the type of insulation we use, usually even, are coming from the Title 24 Part 6. What was it? Title 24 Part 6? Yeah, it's Title 24 Part 6. From the Title 24 Part 6 report, which is done by the energy consultant. So what would happen was there was a time where that report wasn't even required. And then there was a time where that report was required, but a lot of authority having jurisdictions weren't wanting to see it on the plans. So there was a report with 8.5 by 11 sheets that were filled out and placed onto the 24 by 36 final sheet that specified the type of water heater, sometimes the brand, sometimes, the type of HVAC system, if it's variable air volume, if it's constant air volume, if it's zoned, if it's an overall thing. But they weren't showing up in the drawings at first. I mean, a lot of cities did want the reflected ceiling plan, which having that drawing is a big help. And sometimes I get frustrated when a city requires it, but it's like, man, it's a good thing to draw. The reflected ceiling plan is a really good thing to have on a project that's getting built. But now a lot of cities are wanting to see these systems show up in the architectural drawings, which is a really good idea. So we got ADUs, right? Junior ADUs. We got accessory dwelling units. We have junior accessory dwelling units. These things have been around for probably like 8 years now in California, that these things have been popular. The Senate Bill 9 passed a couple of years ago, which is, I believe, allowing a single family lot to be split into two. But from my understanding, once you do that, you can't have a junior ADU anymore. I'm not sure though, because if you just have a single family R1 lot, you can do an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit, so you could turn that into 3 units. But with the SB 9, it looks like you could turn it into 4, but not 6. I mean, that would probably be ridiculous. Having 6 units on an R1 lot, that'd be crazy. Especially with those big setbacks they have, and a lot of R1s are not that big. I've probably been a couple other architects that, I met a lot. Yeah, anyways. I'm not going to sit here and try to recall every architect I met. Have I met myself yet? I don't know. Man, it'd be great, man. Those are some of my models. There's going to be some videos about that coming up. This is not an original. Don't get excited. This is a Antoni Gaudi drawing. So we're in a profession that's susceptible to economic swings. We've accepted that, or have we not? And then there's the issue of you come out of architecture school having done a lot of schematic design and not much else. But it does take that long to just like get a grasp on, or maybe, I don't know, getting a grasp on high quality schematic design is something that takes a lot of time. But I feel like a lot of us who finish architecture school are thrown into the field, and the design development phase and the construction documents phase have a lot of things that we're very unfamiliar with as graduates out of architecture school. I mean, studying for the architect registration exam or working in the field, well, that's why we have to do both. But they both provide very useful information. So what are the stats though? The actual stats, it seems to be that construction is on the decline in California. Oh yeah, we got Björk Ingels. How could I forget? I mean, I've never met him actually. I was at one of his talks once, but I never met him. He is probably when he first blew up, so to speak, he was probably the first architect to operate at the level that he did at the age that he did. I don't even know how old he was. It was just like, relatively speaking, he was young. And he managed to achieve success at that age that it seems like no one really did before for a while, for maybe for multiple generations. He's got 2 books. I mean, as far as I know, he might have more than 2 books. Yes is More. An archi-comic on architectural evolution. Björk Ingels Group. And it was really cool. It was the firm's architectural monograph presented as a comic book. Very cool idea. Their second book hot to cold. Was arranged, I believe, by the climate zones the projects were in. And they went from hot to cold. Like, that's something that is probably going to start being copied pretty soon. Yeah, the work is very cool. They worked for, or I mean, Björk Ingels, I believe, worked for OMA for a long time. And it seems like out of OMA, the Office of Metropolitan Architecture, I believe, founded by Rem Koolhaas. A lot of very successful architects came out of that firm and had other successful ventures. But they shared the approach. They shared the approach that came from the Office of Metropolitan Architecture. And I mean, not that they created the approach, but they did create something. They did pave a way, I believe. Because it's a language that a lot of us borrowed. Like, it's the way they diagram is a very powerful communication tool. I've been doing diagrams of my projects which I haven't looked at lately. But they were heavily influenced by the Office of Metropolitan Architecture. They were heavily influenced by Bjarke Ingels Group. They were heavily influenced by Frank Gehry also. Frank Gehry he does those physical models. His office has those physical models where you see the program elements before they get wrapped in the oddly shaped skin. So I often wondered what it would be like to combine that type of Frank Gehry diagram with those OMA, MVRDV, Bjarke-Ingels group diagrams. So this is the Architecture Podcast. And the day of a different kind of podcast has not yet arrived. Because I'm going to have to wear a hip hop hat. Today I'm wearing an architecture hat. A friend of mine recently put me onto Lauryn Hill's Unplugged album, and that was fire. I'm surprised I hadn't heard it. It's got to be a while since it came out. When did it come out? – 2002. Wow. Also, I'm not going to be showing these projects today because that's going to require me to wear a different hat. So, we have the zoning code when we're doing the large scale schematic stuff. And that varies from city to city. But then we have the building code, which is the California building code. The physical book that I have that I reference is the International Building Code, which the California Building Code is based off of. I believe it's got the same chapter. We're organization for the most part. But the zoning code is something that would be interesting to see in book form. Like for LA, for example.